because we're always involved, and especially clarinet players, it seems, love tools. They love to talk about the instrument and the barrel and the mouthpiece and the reed, the ligature, and everything else. And these are all tools. The instrument itself is merely a tool, the goal being to produce a musical phrase ultimately, and to link that phrase into a grander scheme of a composition. So I call this tools of expression because it's not a physical tool that you can put in your case or take home with you. It's something that you have to develop within you. And it is a technique, and it's involved in a whole lot of other things. And each part of what goes into playing legato I could easily spend an hour on by itself, but let me cover a few things very quickly. And the reason I picked this particular topic, again, is we're just dealing with concepts and getting really towards playing artistically and playing musically, rather than just getting to play. Because I think one of the more unfortunate things that's taken hold in our culture is this sort of culture of what I call instrumental manipulation, which people are teaching a lot about playing fast, getting around the instrument, and all these other things, but they're not talking about like the things that I consider essentially important, which is getting toward really expressing something musically and putting notes together in a meaningful way, and that's what legato helps us to do. Now, in terms of equipment, I'll just cover that briefly. If you want to have the best clarinet that money can buy, what I suggest you do is drive to Philadelphia and have a session with Ricardo Morales and give your clarinet to him. And until he hands it back, you have the best clarinet money can buy. So really, it's all about who's playing on the instrument, much more than any other part of the equipment. Now, you have to have something that functions, and functions specifically for you. And that's something you have to figure out for yourself. I personally prefer to have an extremely light setup, a reed that's very flexible, and I find the advantage to that is when you play with a lot of dynamic range, which anyone who plays a lot professionally will have to have. When you play, especially when you play softly in the lower register, a softer reed will not climb sharp to the point where that you can't control it, whereas a harder setup is much harder to do that on. That's my preference. It gives you much more flexibility in terms of intonation. And as I've said many times, this instrument, no matter what brand or style or who modified it, doesn't play in tune just by itself. Only the player can play it in tune. Because if I play one pitch, and it may be right in the center on a tuner, that's not in tune, because depending on what note it is in any given chord, you may have to move that needle any number of ways. So flexibility is the key for that. So let's see if anything's working on this instrument today, and I'll see what we can talk about in terms of legato. Anybody recognize this passage?
From Carmen.
From Carmen, right. One of the entraps from Carmen. And it's an absolutely beautiful solo for the instrument. It has to be written really well for the instrument. None of the connections are particularly awkward. And it's a good solo to practice, to try to see how much what my teacher used to call connective tissue you can get in between the notes, so that you're not simply making a series of unconnected pitches. Getting a meaningful musical connection. Including across the register break. So a lot of it comes down to basic fundamentals of playing. And I've come up with an expression, or at least part of an expression, that deals with fundamentals, and that most problems that come with playing the clarinet come down to two issues. You have to know how to hold it, and you have to know how to blow it. It's really that simple. And fortunately, I'm not talking about articulation, or else it would get even more filthy than that. But the proper position of the hands on the instrument is an enormous aid to everything you need to do in terms of technical playing. And it's basically, it's well covered in books like the Daniel Bonat Clarinetist Compendium and Larry Guy's Bonat Workshop book. Those are both excellent books for this study, so I won't spend much time on it. But I will say, if you're having issues with technique, the only quick way to improve your technique is to fix a faulty hand position. Other than that, it's all hard work. So once you get the proper feeling so that your hands can really get anywhere on the instrument without excessive wrist movement or arm movement, you're in really excellent shape. The second most important thing in playing legato is the air. And the main thing you have to remember as a wind player is that your body knows how to breathe. You don't have to learn. And the best thing, all the other best thing is that air is free. So you can take as much of it as you need at any given time. So what I would suggest is learning not to get in the way of your body getting air to itself. And the concept I use when taking air in is simply, one is if I had just run a city block and stopped. And what happens when you do that is your body goes, you can't. And that's your body getting air to itself in the most efficient way it can. So you simply make sure your jaw is loose and you just allow yourself, and that's air. You're completely full of air. It didn't take any effort. But once you start using these muscles up here, it doesn't work. You have to allow your body to expand on its own. Don't expand your body to breathe. Breathe in order to expand your body. And then you can get air very, very quickly. And over time, this becomes absolutely automatic and very easy to do. And then what you do with the air is you support your sound all the time from the gut, from the diaphragm level, so that you have a constant, no matter whether you're playing pianissimo or fortissimo, whether you're at the fullest amount of air or you're empty of air, you're always have the same support coming from here. Again, it's I could spend an hour on this, but I need to move quickly through there. And lastly, when you're talking about the embouchure itself, and again, we could spend so much time on that, make sure you don't chew or bite the reed when you're moving around the instrument into different registers or between notes. This just gets in the way. You want to support the embouchure by keeping the jaws open. My teacher used to say they should be open up to fit a pencil between your back molars, and that would make sure you have enough openness for the jaws. So you don't want to be wide open, but you don't want to be clamped shut. That will just choke off the reed. So if you have a truly open set of jaws, then the reed is allowed to freely vibrate. As opposed to, you end up getting that quality when you squeeze too much. Okay. In terms of developing the finger technique required to play proper legato, I would say that the Bible, it starts with Berman number 3. I mean, everyone knows this scale pattern. Is that the close A page? Does anyone use this? Okay. So here's why it's not adequate for proper technique. Listen to a few lines of it. Okay, etc., etc. So this is a Berman scale. Covering the entire range on every scale, at least once with a Berman scale. And the close A scale leaves all these holes all over the clarinet, because at the most it ever goes is 2 octaves. Sometimes it doesn't even do that. So you need to be absolutely comfortable in every key on the instrument in the full extent of its range. And that's why Berman scales are so much better than close A scales. They're longer and they take longer to practice and they're more boring, but they're unbelievably important. And also, the length of them is good for endurance. The next question with Berman is which edition to use, and I say use both. Use both Carl Fischer, the old edition, and then get the David Height book also, because they're arranged differently. The Carl Fischer, the original, is arranged by pattern. In other words, you do scales, all the different keys, and then you go to whatever, arpeggios and all the different keys, and then scales and thirds, whereas the Height is arranged C major, everything, A minor, everything. And what I would suggest for your practice, for those of you who are really serious, is to take the Carl Fischer and do one pattern for every key, preferably at least the scales, maybe one other, and then go to the Height and do one major and one minor all the way through, which should take you about an hour. And then you're pretty good for the day after that. But if you do that for 6 months, I guarantee you will see a remarkable change in your playing over a long period of time. And it's just incredibly important to be comfortable in the funny, the strange keys on the clarinet. And that will come in very handy, because the reason that keys other than C major get progressively harder is very simple. C major scale. Except for crossing the break, every note change is represented by one finger moving. It makes it very easy to scale. Then you go to B major. With almost no exception, every note involves at least 2 fingers and sometimes more. And often you're opening and closing holes at the same time. But to get a B major scale to sound as good as a C major scale is a lot of work. And so you have to practice it every day. And the way that you practice is also very specific, I think. We're not trying to get a legato quality in scale practice. You want each finger motion to be very quick and very efficient, so that the finger moves only at the very last possible second. And it's a very abrupt motion, almost like a piston moving up and down over the keys. You don't want to be doing a lot of this kind of thing. You want to have a very efficient finger motion. You don't hit the clarinet, but you are very efficient. The legato motion is different, but it comes from a very efficient knowledge of every finger motion on the clarinet in advance. The other very good exercise for developing a finger independence is in this book by Paul Jean-Jean, The Vademecum for the clarinet. Is anyone familiar with this book?
Yeah, sure.
All right, Robert DeLutis knows it. Not surprised, considering how he plays. The first exercise in this book is very simple. It's almost, I think he calls it a trill exercise, and it sounds something like this. And then you move up by half steps, all the way up through the register break. And then you play them twice as fast. Now this exercise is wonderful for smoothing out all the technique that the Behrman helps you build. It really makes you isolate every motion just about on the instrument and really refine it. These are the half step and whole step motions, obviously not the scales and thirds, which are also very important. Now this exercise, you can actually use it to practice your legato technique. I don't necessarily advise that. But legato fingers differ from what I talked about before in that the motion is what you would call curvy with the fingers. Instead of strict up and down, you're trying to be just a little gentle, both going down and coming up. It's what I call the squeeze technique. Instead of coming down with maximum efficiency, you're kind of squeezing it down, like you're coming up against a little resistance coming down. And coming up, you squeeze the clarinet first and then release. It's almost like if you're going to jump off something, you bend your knees first and you come up. So it's sort of down, up. Rather than you see the difference between those two? It's incredibly important, and you can hear the difference in the sound it makes. So when you have a technical passage, it's all the more efficient Behrman scale type motion, but when you want it to be smooth, it's a curvy, again, we'll talk about this more the way it goes on. The last thing about the fingers, when you practice your scales, the goal is to drill the rhythm of the scales into your fingers. not just the pattern. So you must practice with the metronome, and you must be exactly with the metronome. A lot of people seem to practice with the metronome, and they don't really allow it to actually drive the force. What I tell students is the rhythm dictates the technique, not the other way around. So anything you practice technically, you practice it slowly enough so that not only can you play it cleanly, but you can play it so that every finger motion is, you can actually really feel the change in fingers. So when you go through your Berman scales and you get to B major or E major or D flat major, which are much harder keys, just slow the metronome down so that every motion is really solid in your technique. So it's really, every note is clearly defined. Okay, so let's go now to actually talking about playing legato, which I think that where legato comes from in terms of your artistry is it comes not just from knowing the technique of playing legato, but it comes from the musical necessity to have a phrase played legato. You want to have it sound singing, you want it to emulate the human voice. And when you play music, you see it right away on the page. When you see a slurred line and it has a melodic contour to it, you immediately start to think, how can I make this line more expressive? And you want to get, again, in between the notes. It's not just the notes on the page, it's how they connect. That's what legato is. And very famous wind player, tuba player by the name of Arnold Jacobs used to say to his students, be a singer in your brain. And what he meant by that is that in your brain, you sing the melody with the greatest purity that you would like to hear it with. And if you hear good singers, whether they're in the classical field or otherwise, when they connect an interval, there's a natural ordamento to it. They sing the ah. They don't have this mechanical stop in between. That's what we're really trying to emulate. We don't want to make a glissando between the notes, but that is what we're really going after. So I talked about the squeeze technique with the clarinet, and I think the best way to try to get it is to find intervals where legato is most possible and try to practice them. And that clarion G to F is a really good interval for that. We compare that to, if we just go back and forth and really try to hear what you're getting in between those notes. So let's see what other musical phrases we can come up with that just automatically call for musically this need, this crying out for legato. What I'm doing when I'm playing this note is, when I'm playing the C, just before I'm going to make the change, the three fingers that have to move to go from C to F, I'm squeezing them down on the clarinet before I bring them up. And also I'm thinking in my mind of connecting the C to the F, as if I were a singer, as if I were going to actually sing that portamento between them. And then the same thing for every interval. It's just that trying to squeeze gently. And the next thing I want to talk about is legato on more difficult intervals. In other words, this is especially true when you have to open holes and close them on the same interval. In other words, from, let's say, clarinet E to G sharp, where you have to not only lift the fingers, but open a key. It's actually a very easy interval to mess up, just even if you're trying to play it efficiently. But when you have to play legato, it's even more difficult. So these are things you have to actually really practice live. What would be a real challenge for anybody, including me, I'm going to try it now, is to play a B major scale in thirds and do it legato. B major, as you know, It's really an awkward key on the clarinet. So to try to get in between every interval and make it smooth. It's a real challenge. So these are the kinds of things that will really test you to see how far you're getting with your technique. And so we look at what, like I was talking about with comparing B major to C major, the things that make a passage harder to get smooth on are exactly these kinds of issues. And I'll take two solos from the orchestral repertoire to demonstrate for you, both on the A clarinet. The first one is from the Schubert Unfinished Symphony. This is actually a very hard solo to play well, and I have to play it in a week, so it's good to try it now. But if you'll notice, some of the intervals are actually rather awkward. Also, the breathing is awkward. You have to go from C to B flat to A flat, which is always a challenge. You have to do it as smoothly as possible, which opens the door for all kinds of that kind of stuff. So you have to really be not only smooth, but efficient. Now let's turn to a solo that's written so beautifully for the clarinet that it's almost never asked on auditions, even though it's an enormous solo. That's the Tchaikovsky from the Pathetique Symphony. Notice how every interval just sort of fits the clarinet like a glove, and it's just the most, one of the most, I'm sure Carl, it's one of the most satisfying solos to play. Also because of the way Tchaikovsky orchestrates it. He doesn't challenge you. He lets you play soft as you want to play. So it's always nice when a composer helps you out by writing something so beautiful, but a lot of the times you just don't get to be so lucky. So let's deal with one other technical issue, and that's the lever keys. That's the keys at the bottom for your little fingers. These present a great challenge, first of all, just to playing well, because they're designed in a way that you're always opening and closing things at the same time. The hardest interval is B natural to C sharp, right, in the clarinet register, or E to F sharp in the low register. There's just no way around. You have to fudge a little bit with them and get in between them. When you play technical, it's pretty easy to make it clean. But when you have to really try to get it smooth, it's, let me just, do you know the Vaughan Williams, the 6 Studies in English Folk Song? Fantastic student piece, very easy, but hard to play really well. Well, I think it's the 5th of them. It's a perfect exercise for this, trying to get really smooth singing sound so there's no bumps in the sound going between them. Breaks. There's lots of them. I remember every time I went over this with Mr. Marcellus, it was always, like make sure the clarinet is absolutely steady in your hands. It cannot move when you go across the break. It's unbelievably important. Now, a lot of us rest the clarinet on the knees. This helps a little bit, but you have to be able to, even if you're playing standing, be absolutely steady. So that it doesn't, you're changing the balance in your hands when you go across the break, but it has to be steady. Same thing in the upper register. So that this is one factor that you don't have to worry about when you're trying to get in between the register breaks. Because a lot of the most delicate and wonderful solos for the instrument go right in between the registers. Just to cite perhaps the most famous example. It's on every audition, and the reason is it's not only hard to be smooth and melodic between the registers, it's hard to be in tune also. So all those things are part of it. But a sort of sister piece to it is actually, I find it even more challenging, although it's never asked. Symphony number 7, which not only provides you with that challenge, but you're changing from a warm A clarinet to a very cold B flat clarinet and going on all those long Bs and short As, and it's a tricky one. Yeah, exactly. So it's something that you just can't shy away from. You have to be really comfortable with the register break. Again, hold the clarinet steady, and the air has to continuously go straight through. And once you have those, it's again just thinking the melodic line in your head and allowing your body to play the clarinet. Let's deal with one more solo that deals with the upper register break. So Beethoven's Fourth Symphony, very difficult solo. So you may notice that for going from C to C sharp there, I decided to play it with the two side keys. Not just the two side keys, but to shade it with the ring finger on the open hole here, just to give it a little more color. Because the risk of going the other way, which just worked there, but you just never know with that. And I think you can make the side C sharp work in this, and it also just has a wonderful smooth quality. Let's talk about the next slur in that solo, from the D natural down to the A, which is a little risky. If you're like me, you're so happy that you got the D out cleanly that you just don't even think about that slur down. But my teacher suggested, and it doesn't work for everyone, is you can actually come down early with the first finger on this slur. And that helps to smooth intervals like that a little bit. So we're going to deal with the second break. Now, there's a technique that's been used for a long time called the half fold. Is everyone familiar with playing in third register with this finger just half on? It's a really good way, I think, to get across the break, but I don't recommend holding on to it after you get across. Some people do, you can use it to shade intonation also, but when you're going, especially a slur that just goes directly, like from E to C sharp, instead of coming straight up with the first finger, I'm moving it down a ways and up. Down, so it uncovers the whole a little at a time. So in slow motion, it's like this. So you're sort of sliding it off the whole. It actually works beautifully. Where you don't have this advantage is when you're slurring from an open note like a C upwards. You don't have the finger down. So what do you do to make the slur a little more cleanly? You can take the risk. What I do, especially when slurring from C to F, which is a tricky interval, or F sharp, which is also a tricky interval, it doesn't come up as much, is I actually put down the first finger with the other fingers, but not on the center of the hole. I put it down on the side of the hole and then pop it back up. I call it a flip. So you're going like this, and it pops back up. And it makes it a little smoother. It's tricky, but when you have a solo like because you're hanging out there. And then, once you're past that, you're in pretty good shape in that piece. Somebody just posted on the internet a recording that my teacher did. Robert Marcellus playing this piece with Rostropovich as a memorial. There was a broadcast in the late 60s. I listened to it yesterday. It was great to hear it again, to hear that kind of playing, not just from him, but from the whole orchestra. It's a wonderful piece for the orchestra to hear that piece with a great orchestra, with a great conductor. It's a good reminder of everything that's important. So let's move up a half step to F sharp, above the staff. Is that everyone's favorite note? Everyone loves F sharp. If you're going to play principal clarinet in an orchestra, you have to be completely fearless in the upper register, in the altissimo register. You can't be intimidated by it at all. And this is a bad note, let's be honest. But if you're slurring to it, my best of luck to you. But this half-hole flick is a very important part of it. Let's see how it's working today. But it's not really all luck if you really are, again, you just can't allow the insecurity that comes with playing a difficult passage to get in the way of your fundamentals, of your supporting from here, keeping the jaws open, and also adjusting the back of the tongue to the proper position. As I talked about in years past, the higher you play on the clarinet, the more E you have to say with your tongue so that the air gets a certain flow to it. Now, in this case, we're slowing from A to F sharp. So it's a perfect opportunity to do this roll-off thing. But at the same time, you have to sing in your brain A to F sharp. So that you get a little bit of smoothness to it. Now, I remember having dinner with two really excellent clarinetists in New York. One had just won a major audition that very day. And they were talking about the solo because he had to play it. And he was talking about using one of these side keys, I think it's the third one, to help pop it up. So my advice to you for this F sharp is to be brave. Be brave and go for it. And be fearless. And Bareman scales, playing on the upper range, it really does increase the security with which you will play. So let's talk about wider slurs now, which are generally a problem because you're dealing with a lot of fingers and you want to bring them down smoothly, but they have to be together in order to make it clean. So let's try one passage and see what happens. Again, you want to launch yourself on a wide interval really from a steady position. And again, it's like if you're going to make a jump, you have to bend your knees and go. It's not an all of a sudden jerky motion. So, like the first one. I'm really thinking about squeezing the clarinet here and also coming up a little bit with the left pinky that's going to come down. But most importantly, because I played the clarinet a lot and I played a lot of scales and I played a lot of everything, is I'm thinking of that interval in my head. I'm singing that interval. And again, the same thing if you go from C to the same A flat, which is even harder because you're now dealing with a lever key. In the game. Later in the movement, you have to go from E flat to E flat, right? Always a tricky slur. So again, we're using the roll-off technique with the first finger, but again, mentally, that thought of getting in between is incredibly important there. Which brings us to Respighi, Pines of Rome. Always difficult, but it gives you the advantage of playing very softly, which makes it a little easier. Again, you want to really try to get in between the notes with your thoughts and be really steady with the clarinet and make sure it doesn't move. So, things like that. The last thing that I want to cover before I take questions is when you start to add velocity. Because I always find that the recipe for a difficult passage on the clarinet is general difficulty, are the intervals hard, and then how fast does it go? Is it fast? Because even C major can become very difficult when it's fast. Take the Rossini Introduction Theme and Variations. It's all in C major, but it's one of the hardest pieces ever written. It's just awkward because it's always moving quickly. So you have a passage like the Schubert Symphony No. 3, which I find actually to be very difficult solo to play legato, but it's absolutely mandatory. It's a very Schubertian line. It's actually very wonderful. So with very fast rhythms like that, again, you just have to be thinking smooth, really smooth, but you have to practice it at first very clean, just cleanly. And then finally you can try to get it smooth. But the rhythm is very important. It can't turn into that, because that's not the piece. It's a 16th note. So that's very important. Similarly, also Schubert, the octet, has a very difficult passage because it involves going to the long B, which is always a note that likes to clonk out. For this one, you're moving this whole hand, so you can really use that technique where you're coming up before you come down. really you're just thinking of all these fingers moving together, even though in reality the pinky has to be slightly independent because it is doing a different function from the others. They simply come down on a hold. This has to come down in a key a certain amount and close it. Very hard. So I think at this point I will take questions and see if I can fill in the blanks of all the things that I left out that you noticed. So, the floor is open. Yes?
I was wondering about voicing the sound, but do you do something with inside the mouth? You talked about the tongue coming up.
Yeah, that's good.
Ooh, and, you know.
Yeah, that's tough. You know, when I left school, I took lessons with Marcellus every week for 4 years. I still didn't know everything yet. I had to figure out a lot of things because we talked about Legato every week and we worked on it, and it was a lot about helping us try to find it rather than telling us what to do. But when you listen to his recordings, there's clearly something going on in the voicing of the notes, because if you listen really carefully to his intervals, there's like this little sort of drippy quality to it, which I love. Often when he's really trying to be legato, I think in one recording in particular, the symphonic metamorphosis, if you know this, the Hindemith. Especially on that G to F. You almost hear that. So there's almost a little of that glissando quality in the voicing. I don't know, I can't tell you exactly technically how I'm doing it, but there is some of that goosing. It's not just the fingers, and it's not just steady air. There's something going on in between those slow intervals. So you want to try to find that. You don't want to overdo it, obviously, because otherwise it sounds, like I said, sort of drippy. But to get really, really smooth, something like that. So yes, there's something. But the voicing of the registration, that is definitely something you're doing with the back of your tongue. Not necessarily with the throat, but it's as you go higher, you're thinking more E. So it feels like the back of your tongue goes higher and higher the more you go. So if you don't move your tongue at all, you get that. So if you think E more as you go up, you get that. You get a more centered and focused sound. Now's your chance. There must be some confusions. Yes? I'll get to you in a second. Yeah.
What do you do for your read processes when you try
Reads?
to do your reads and stuff?
If it doesn't work, I throw it out, honestly. I'm not, you're talking to someone who literally in junior high got a C in shop class. And I'm not embarrassed to admit it. But I don't work well with tools. What I really need is like a student who's really good with reads to make them for me. Honestly, when I was in school, we had some really wonderful students who learned to make reads, and they were great at it at the age of their careers. And what I figured out is that I was going to have to learn to play bad reads. And I do a lot. I play reads that most people wouldn't ever consider playing. They're not balanced real well, especially in the winter. It becomes a huge pain. But I just realized that I think the general rule is the better you play, the fewer bad reads you have. And the importance of this is there is not an audition you're going to take or a concert you're going to play, except for maybe 5% of the time, where you're going to have a read that you're really happy with. And so what happens is you end up having to work a little harder at playing. I remember talking to Clark Brody about this. Clark Brody was the principal clarinet in the Chicago Symphony for 27 years. And he talked about times when he just had nothing to play on. And he had no idea how he was going to get through a concert. And then he would give a really outstanding performance. And other times when he was really happy with what he had and nothing happened at all. But he mentioned a specific time when they were on tour in Philadelphia, and they took a matchbook to adjust this reed, pull it away from the mouthpiece a little bit. Some of you may do this. You put a little, like a business card under the reed and pull it away just to give it a little more. And instead of putting it behind the reed, he put it right down the middle of the reed. And it was right before the downbeat of a Bruckner symphony, and he didn't have time. But he played the whole concert on this split reed. And he said, you know, he played really well. He's like, he's wondering what the people in the balcony saw him split the reed before the concert. And he said, I hope there were no clarinet students up there. They're all going to think they have to split their reeds in half right before the concert. I would say, you know, don't go out of your way to find the worst reed in the box. But, you know, just accept that good days where everything is really working fine and you really feel great, they're really few and far between. And I've said this before, I don't know if I've said it here, the real essential difference between an excellent conservatory student and an excellent professional, because you often see even music critics talk about youth orchestras, oh, they sound professional, is not how they sound after a whole semester of rehearsals on Capriccio Espagnol or 10 rehearsals for their recital. It's how they sound when they get out of bed and just nothing's working that day. And a great professional, an excellent professional, will get through the gig and nobody else on the gig or the audience will really know they're having a bad day. It'll sound fine. But a student having a bad day, everything will fall apart because they don't have the self-confidence. The other aspect of that is rhythm. Is when your rhythm is fundamentally good, at least if you're squeaking and squawking and things aren't coming out quite right, at least you're right with everybody when it's happening. And a lot of people who are not experienced, because they're having trouble controlling their instrument, they lose track of the pulse. And they try to get notes to come out instead of trying to really just be on top of it. Those are the things that are really important. It's like really just like counting. And you're not always going to be able to play with your most beautiful sound, but most people who hear you aren't clarinet players, and they don't know the difference. It sounds like a clarinet. That's why I don't like to play for clarinet players. Yes, in the back.
One of the things Harold Wright used to do in lessons was say, okay, now play on your second reed.
Yeah.
To sort of get at the same issue you're talking about.
Well, Harold Wright was, to me, there were two of the greatest clarinet players of that generation were Harold Wright and Robert Marcellus, and they're completely different from each other. They're equally wonderful. Harold Wright actually had a much longer career because he was lucky to have better health. But I always found when I was very young student, if I listened to a lot of Harold Wright one week, I would start to sound a little more like that. If I listened to more Marcellus one week, I would start to sound a little more like that. So I think listening to recordings and listening to players is incredibly important. But what he says about play it on your second reed is true, because for a professional, they just pick up another reed. If it doesn't feel good, they'll just gut it out. But a student might fall completely apart. So it's a good lesson to be learned. You had one more question.
Yes, I was wondering about barrels. You know, there's so many barrels out there,
Yeah.
tapered this way, tapered that way. What is your take on barrels?
My take is, again, you want to have equipment that plays more or less to trying to get the tuner needle to be closer to the middle on every note as you can. So that's for that reason.
So intonation is like the
I
primary.
think intonation is the only reason to play a barrel.
Right.
I mean, because the difference in sound quality that it's going to make is so small that you will notice. Maybe your best friend, if they're a clarinet player, will notice, but nobody who plays flute or oboe is ever going to notice. I don't care what wood it's made of. I don't care how much it costs. It just isn't going to make that much difference. But if it plays slightly better in tune, everybody who plays with you will be much happier if you use it. And again, remember that intonation is a function of ears more than equipment. It's a function of putting the notes in the right place. I mean, I can take almost any note on the instrument and play it in 5 different pitches, which is why I'm able to play in tune. And which is why I consider the long B on the clarinet to be the worst note. Most people say it's the B flat, 1/2 step below that. But it's not true, because you can play that B flat anywhere because of all the different fingerings you can use for it. The long B, it's very hard to move. So that's the note where you have to be the most careful. Yeah.
Dave, how do you use a metronome with the finger exercise?
That's a good question. Does anyone have a metronome on them? Because this is actually maybe revelatory for some people. And yeah, instead of how most people practice learning scales or any scales or anything, will be to simply play. I say instead of doing that, play. Play it on the offbeats. And you can use your Dr. Beat for this to great effect. And the reason is, that way, do it every day. But your mind has to insert the downbeats for you. So you're actively using your sense of rhythm. A metronome can become a wonderful crutch that relieves you of your responsibility rhythmically. Or it can be something that challenges you to play better rhythmically. And using offbeats, my mind has to concentrate on finding the downbeat rather than allowing the metronome to do it for me. You can just put your brain absolutely to sleep otherwise. So I would say give that a try. And you can do it in all kinds of very difficult passages in the repertoire. And really, it aids your sense of rhythm and your sense of pulse, which I define as keeping a steady tempo at all times, a tremendous amount. And those are the real things that aid you, is being able to stay steady. How far over are we? Over. All right, let me take one more question. Well, two more questions.
Maybe it's a good question.
Sure.
In this case. In voicing the high E,
Mm-hmm.
if you're doing it in it, and you go to E to get the high A out, and if I'm working around the high A, B flat, to B and C, sometimes the E voicing kind of gets stuck.
Yeah.
So I go back down to the E
Coming
and
back
F.
down, coming back down.
It's
Right, coming back down from the altissimo. Like right there? Yeah, I'm trying to think. Again, I think that in order to get it unstuck, use your brain to think of the musical interval rather than worrying about how you're doing it technically. And that way I think you'll find, once you're thinking of the A or whatever the downward note is, that you'll find the voicing for it. Again, it has a lot to do with having the clarinet in your hands and in your mouth a lot. But if you know basically where every note is on the instrument, then it doesn't become, I mean, those downward slurs are hard, from C to C. That's a challenge too, to get it smooth. But you've got to use your brain in more ways than to just do the technique of playing. You have to sing that interval. Yeah.
Do you think, as far as practice, do you think it's more important as how many hours per day or how well efficient per time period?
Well, there's no question that if you want to do this, here's James Levine, who's one of the greatest musicians on the planet ever, said something very interesting about talent. He said, talent is the ability to be good at something if you work hard. And I think that's true. And nobody has the same amount of talent. If you're extremely talented, you may be able to get by with a very little amount of focused practice. If you're less talented, and it's pretty easy to figure out how talented you are just by looking around you and seeing what other people are doing, then you have to practice more. That's all there is to it. There's no reason that somebody who has a modest amount of talent can't be very successful. They just have to have the guana in them to do it. And that means they have to work maybe 10 times harder than somebody who has a lot of talent. And it's really what it's all about. Some people are so untalented that they have no chance. It is true. But really, almost anyone, if they're really willing to put in the work and figure it out, can achieve. So what I say is do the right amount. But it's important to take regular breaks in order not to have physical injuries. And it's important to be very focused. But like I said, if you do the Behrman book for an hour a day and go back 6 months later, I suspect that you'll be happy with the amount of improvement. If it's not enough, then maybe you have to do an hour and a half a day. But it's work that everyone who does this well has probably done at some point, unless they're really one of the miracle talents. So I can tell you that the hardest working man in show business right now is Ricardo Morales, and he's already lapped us a couple of times, all of us. And he's still practicing more than anybody else, even though he has to have the busiest schedule. So what chance do any of us have to catch up? And that's what he's thinking. He doesn't want anyone to catch up. So, and the thing to remember, I mean, when I was in school, Ricardo, I mean, he was a 16 or so he was getting there. But as far as we were concerned, he didn't exist yet. We didn't know about him. So I feel like the rules got changed in the middle of the game. You know, we were all thinking we were all in good shape, and then he comes along, and now it's a whole new ballgame. There's no reason that every major symphony in the country shouldn't think that they should expect their next principal clarinet to play like him. So that's the standard we all have to strive towards if you want to play that game and get one of those jobs. So that's a pretty high bar that's been set there. So, you had one? Yeah.
The pros and cons of resting the clarinet on your knee, which
I don't know.
personal preference then, is that what?
I personally prefer to put it there and then move it around. You know, when I play, I like to move, so I'm not married to this. But it's nice when you need to, you know, when you really have something that's, I mean, I saw you play Gypsy Bear a year ago. I'd like to be able to rest the clarinet. I'm not going to play that. But I mean, I remember, like, you know, it was real solid when you did it, and that's a hard, if you don't know, it's this, it's like this, you know, it's like one of those gnarly Opperman studies, and it's fast, and it's like, boy, it's nice to be, and also you're dealing with this, so it's all like this all the time, and it's nice to be able to keep it steady. So I say, why not once in a while, but if you're going to play a concerto and you need to play standing, then, yeah. And if you play double lip, that's another story. I don't, but, okay, so